Tonight's story isn't just another late-night ghost tale. It's a true account pulled from a place most people refuse to enter after sunset. If you've ever wondered what really happens inside a cemetery after the gates close, what waits behind locked mausoleums, and what a lonely child spirit might do for just one more birthday, then stay with me. Because once you hear what happened to the man who worked nights at Milbrook Cemetery, once you learn about the forbidden rules, the birthday candles that would not die, and the child who never truly left, you may never look at a quiet graveyard the same way again. So dim your lights, put on your headphones, and settle in. This story is based on real events, and it begins the moment he stepped inside the gates, and the dead began to notice him. I work nights at a cemetery, and the forbidden rules still keep me awake, long after my shift ends, long after I leave the gates behind, long after the sun comes up and the world looks normal again. People think cemeteries are quiet, peaceful, holy even, but the truth is that quiet can be a lie, silence can be a warning, and sometimes the things buried beneath us aren't as still as we want them to be. I'm telling this story now because I don't sleep anymore. Not really. I close my eyes and the first thing I see is that worn leather notebook resting in my hands for the first time. I hear the way the basement light flickered overhead. I feel the way the chair vibrated beneath me as if the building itself was breathing. I remember the moment I realized this job wasn't just a job. This place had been waiting for me, calling me, drawing me in long before I understood what answering the call meant. And now that I'm months past that moment, I can say this: nothing prepares you for the truth about Milbrook Cemetery. Not the pay, not the training, not even the rules. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the moment my life split in two. The person I was before I walked into the basement office, and the person I became the moment Mr. Dalka slid that leather notebook across the desk and said the words that still make my stomach drop. These rules are not suggestions, Mr. Cole. They are the only reason people like you come home alive. I should have walked out then. I should have laughed, thanked him for his time, and left that building behind. But life pushes you towards strange decisions when you're tired, broke, and desperate for a fresh start. And I was all three. There's a moment in life, a pivot point, where everything could turn out differently if you make the right choice. That day was mine, and I failed it. The only reason I'm here to tell you this story is because something, or someone, decided to give me more time. It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels like filler in your life. Lukewarm weather, traffic lights that take too long, a stack of bills staring at you from your kitchen counter. I'd been officially retired from paramedic work for 6 months, though retired made it sound like a choice. My back had given out before my will did. 22 years of lifting stretchers, carrying bodies, and sprinting through hallways with dying people in my arms had finally caught up to me. The pension wasn't bad, but it wasn't enough to keep my head above water either. So when I saw a listing for a night shift maintenance position at Milbrook Cemetery, full benefits, flexible hours, no heavy lifting, I convinced myself it was fate, or luck, or mercy. Funny how we lie to ourselves when we need something badly enough. The administration building sits on the far west side of the cemetery grounds, built in the 1940s when the place expanded. It looks normal from the outside. Brick walls, a pitched roof, white trim. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt something change. The air thickened as if the atmosphere had weight. Even the sunlight filtering through the windows looked muted, like it had to fight its way in. A sign pointed me toward the basement. Each step creaked under my boots as I walked down. The door at the bottom was cracked open, humming fluorescent lights spilling into the hall. Inside, file cabinets lined the walls like metal sentries, papers stacked in neat piles across every surface, a coffee mug half filled with something cold and untouched. And behind the desk sat a man who instantly made my skin itch with unease. "Mr. Cole," he said before I could introduce myself, right on time. His voice was smooth but too precise, like someone who chose every syllable. His name was stitched into a nameplate at the corner of his desk. Victor Dalka, director. He didn't look old, but he had the posture of someone who'd been carrying secrets for far too many years. His dark hair was slicked back tight against his scalp, and his gray eyes darted to the door behind me as if checking whether something had followed me in. The first thing he did was offer me water. The second thing he did was lock the door. "You understand, this job requires reliability," he said, folding his hands together, "and absolute adherence to instruction." I told him my background. 22 years as a paramedic, trained in protocol, trained not to panic, trained to stay calm even when the world fell apart around me. He nodded once, almost approvingly. "Yes, you're exactly what we need. Your predecessor lacked your discipline." Something in his voice cracked on that word. Predecessor. "What happened to him?" I asked. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Ray Holt served here for 15 years. Then, unexpectedly, he resigned." "Why?" "Personal reasons." The way he said it was too clean, too rehearsed, as if someone had coached him on the proper response. As if any deviation from the script might open a door he wasn't prepared to walk through. I should have left. But then he named the salary. $49,000 a year, paid weekly, overtime available if needed, medical benefits starting immediately. It was more than tempting. It was life-changing. Before I could talk myself out of it, he opened his bottom desk drawer and pulled out the notebook. Old, weathered, leather softened by decades of handling, but the spine repaired with strips of electrical tape. I could smell it before he even pushed it across the desk. Earthy, dusty, as if it had been buried. "These," he said quietly, "are the rules. You must read them. You must memorize them. And above all, you must follow them." There was no humor in his voice, no lightness, just a seriousness that made my throat tighten. I picked up the notebook. It was warm, too warm. The first page read, "Milbrook Cemetery Night Protocols established 1982, revised 1991, 2004, 2010, 2016. Below that, 8 rules, handwritten in careful block lettering. But before I could even read the first rule, Dalka tapped the top of the page with one finger. "There is also an unwritten rule," he said. "A rule 0, if you will. Never speak your full name aloud on cemetery grounds after midnight, ever." "Why?" I asked. He only looked at me. That was somehow worse than an answer. I turned back to the notebook. Rule 1. Count the flowers on grave 214 at midnight. Mark the number. Do not touch them. Rule 2. Ignore the woman in white on the northern path between midnight and 3. Do not acknowledge her in any way. Rule 3. Avoid the Rowan Mausoleum between 2 and 3 a.m. Under all circumstances, no exceptions. Rule 4. Retrieve any personal items left on graves after sunset. Do not inspect them. Do not attempt to return them. Rules 5 through 8 grew progressively stranger. Each one felt less like a guideline for maintenance and more like a warning carved into a storm shelter door. I shut the notebook slowly. "This all seems a little extreme," I said. "Mr. Cole," Dalka replied, leaning back in his chair, "this is an old cemetery, older than most people realize. Over the years, we've learned what must be done to maintain the environment. These rules are the product of experience." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The silence between us did the talking. Fear is a strange thing. It doesn't always announce itself with racing heartbeats or shaking hands. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it settles quietly in your bones and waits. I felt it then, sitting across from that man, that notebook warming my palms, those rules dancing in my head like warnings from a future I hadn't lived yet. But again, the money was good. Too good. My logic drowned beneath the weight of practicality, a common human mistake. "When do I start?" I asked. Dalka smiled. But it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives you for telling you something unpleasant. "Tonight," he said, 11 p.m. We shook hands. His skin was cold and dry as old paper. He held on a moment too long, as if warning me, as if asking me to reconsider, as if he already knew how this story would end. The October air bit at my face as I walked back to my truck, notebook tucked beneath my arm. The cemetery stretched out in front of me in long rows and dim paths, oak trees clawing at the gray sky like skeletal fingers, leaves scattered in the wind, gathering in piles against old marble monuments. For a brief second, I thought I saw someone standing on the northern path, a dim figure in white. But when I blinked, she was gone. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, a shadow thrown by the wind. But when I opened the notebook again in the cab of my truck, the page seemed warmer than before, and the ink looked fresh. Wet, almost, as if someone had written the rules moments ago. That should have been my second warning. Instead, I took a deep breath, closed the notebook, and convinced myself I was imagining things. Looking back, that was the last moment of peace I would feel for a long, long time. And if you think I'm exaggerating, trust me, you'll understand by the time I get to the end of this story. Before I continue, if you enjoy true paranormal experiences and want to support the channel so I can make more videos like this, take a second to subscribe. It helps more than you know. And after everything I've been through, I promise you, the next parts only get darker. I arrived at Milbrook Cemetery that night with the kind of nervous energy that settles deep in your stomach, the kind you try to swallow down but can taste anyway. The air was crisp, colder than it should have been for late October, and a low fog rolled across the grass like something alive. It clung to the ground, slipping between headstones, drifting through the iron gates as if the cemetery itself was exhaling. I pulled into the employee parking lot and killed the engine. The silence hit me the moment the truck shut off. Thick, total, unnatural. Even the crickets had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your pulse sound loud in your ears. The notebook rested on the passenger seat. I hadn't realized how much comfort I'd been taking in its presence until that moment. Strange how something so old, so unsettling, could feel like a tether to reality. Maybe because Dalka had made it sound like that notebook was the only safety net I had. When I picked it up, the leather felt warm again, pulsing like something inside it was alive and listening. Rule 0. Never speak your full name aloud after midnight. I whispered my name, testing the air, letting it barely escape between my lips. "Ethan." The fog shifted, not with the breeze, with purpose. As if the cemetery heard me, I shut up immediately. The maintenance shed wasn't far from the parking lot, a small brick building with a tin roof and a rusting door that groaned under its own weight. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered on overhead with a sputter. Tools hung neatly on the walls. A metal workbench stretched across the back. Lockers lined the east wall. Ray Holt's locker, number 29, still had his name written on a piece of tape across the top. Someone had tried to peel it off, but only half the name had come away, leaving jagged residue behind like torn skin. I stared at that locker for a few seconds too long, wondering what Ray had seen in this place, wondering why a man would abandon 15 years of steady pay without so much as a full explanation. The graveyard wasn't what scared him, it was the rules. I opened my new locker and found a flashlight, gloves, a map of the grounds, a radio, and a winter coat thick enough to survive a blizzard. Dalka must have left it for me, and I had the unsettling sense that he knew I'd need it sooner rather than later. I stepped outside, pulling the heavy coat on as the fog curled around my boots. Midnight was 30 minutes away, enough time for a preliminary round of the west side. The west path curved past the older stones, weathered angels, cracked marble, worn names fading into dust, a place where history felt close enough to touch. The flashlight beam cut across the path, slicing through the fog. Every sound felt amplified. A twig snapping, a squirrel darting into the underbrush, my own footsteps crunching against the gravel. But beneath those familiar sounds was something else, something I couldn't yet identify, a faint hum, low and almost electric, like a distant generator, except there were no generators anywhere near the west grounds. The first shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I spun, flashlight cutting through the fog, scanning between the tombstones. Nothing, no movement, no shape, no footsteps, but I knew I had seen something. A sliver of white, a flutter of fabric. Rule 2, ignore the woman in white on the northern path between midnight and 3. This wasn't the northern path, this was the west grounds. So what the hell did I just see? A cold ripple slid down my spine. My breath fogged out in front of me, even though the temperature wasn't low enough for that. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear breathing. But I felt it, that electric hum shifting, rising, sharpening, like something tuning itself, watching me. The cemetery clock tower rang once in the distance, but it wasn't the usual chime. This one cracked, distorted, like metal bending. When I checked my watch, it read 11:59 p.m. Midnight was seconds away. I made my way toward grave 214, where Rule 1 said I had to count the flowers. The grave sat beneath an oak tree older than most buildings in town. The branches hung low and skeletal, bare of leaves, strange for October. I approached slowly, flashlight steady in my hand. The flowers were already there. A fresh bouquet of white lilies, stems wrapped in a neat green ribbon. Dew clung to the petals like tears. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 flowers. But the smell hit me before I finished writing the number in the margin of the notebook. They smelled freshly cut, not hours old, minutes. Who had been here? I pointed my flashlight around. No footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of visitors. But the ground felt unsettled, soft, as if someone had just walked across it. I marked 5 beside the rule and shut the notebook. As soon as I did, a sound drifted through the air. A woman humming, not singing, humming, low, steady, mournful. the kind of sound a mother makes while rocking a child to sleep. I turned toward the north path instinctively before remembering the rule. Ignore the woman in white. Do not approach. Do not speak. Do not follow. I didn't mean to break the rule, but something about the sound, so human, so sorrowful, pulled my focus like a magnet. I saw her silhouette before I saw the details. A tall figure in a long dress, gliding rather than walking, her shape wavering as if caught in heat haze despite the cold. She moved between the headstones, slow and deliberate, searching. The humming grew softer, then sharper, then stopped altogether. For a long moment the cemetery went dead silent again. When she finally vanished into the fog, I forced myself to breathe. I had survived my first rule test. Or maybe she simply chose to ignore me. For now. By 1 a.m., I had almost convinced myself things were fine. Strange, yes, but manageable. The fog thinned. The air warmed slightly. My flashlight felt steadier in my grip. I even found myself humming a familiar tune from my paramedic days, something to calm my own nerves as I made my way toward the middle section of the cemetery. And that was almost my mistake, because I nearly walked straight into the one place I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near after 2 a.m., the Rowan Mausoleum. I didn't know its name then, didn't know its history, didn't know the story of the girl who died on her 7th birthday, or her mother who spent the rest of her life trying to bridge the gap between their two worlds. All I knew was what I felt. Cold. Not temperature cold, bone cold. The kind that seeps inside you, threading beneath your ribs, wrapping around your spine, sinking deep. I stopped walking immediately, instinct pulling me backward before logic caught up. Every hair on my arm stood up. My breath turned into fog again. The grass crackled beneath my boots. A rim of frost clung to the edges of the mausoleum's stone doorway, glittering like teeth. And then I saw it. Light. A faint whispered glow pulsing behind the iron gate, weak like candlelight. But it was moving, drifting, dancing. I knew the rule. Rule 3 was etched clearly in the notebook. Avoid the mausoleum between 2 and 3 a.m. under all circumstances. But it wasn't anywhere near 2 yet. I checked my watch again. 1:17 a.m. Safe, or so I thought. As I stepped closer, the ground beneath my feet made a soft crunch. Frost crept toward me in slow, expanding veins, forming right in front of my eyes. I took half a step back. The frost stopped. The air stopped. The wind stopped. Everything froze, as if the cemetery held its breath. And then a soft sound leaked from inside the mausoleum. A child's giggle, soft, pure, echoing. Then it shifted, turning sharp, breaking into a sob so heartbreaking, my chest tightened painfully. I spun around, expecting someone behind me. No one. But the sobbing continued. Not in front of me, not behind me, inside my head, inside the air, inside the ground. A vibration, a call, a plea. I backed away slowly until the frost stopped following. The air warmed. The wind returned. The cemetery exhaled. Later, I would learn the truth about that place, about the birthday cake that appeared every year, about the candles that never melted, about the mother who froze to death in that very building waiting for a daughter who never came home. But that night, I knew only fear, not panic, not terror, just a profound, unmistakable feeling that something in that mausoleum had woken up because it sensed me, and it wanted something. By the time I made it back to the shed, my hands were shaking. The flashlight flickered uselessly. The notebook felt heavier in my jacket pocket. I shut the shed door and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. When I turned around, The overhead lights crackled, buzzed, then flickered off for 3 seconds. 3 long, dark, suffocating seconds, and when they flicked back on, something was sitting on my workbench, a candle, pink, unlit, perfectly placed. I hadn't brought it inside. There hadn't been one in the locker. Someone or something had placed it there. A birthday candle, and without knowing why, without even understanding the story yet. I knew who it belonged to. The girl. The one whose sobs followed me across the cemetery. The one who died decades ago. The one who, according to the rules, I wasn't supposed to acknowledge. But she had acknowledged me, and midnight wasn't even the dangerous hour. The worst was still ahead. I should have walked away that night. I should have quit. I should have thrown the notebook at Dalka's feet and told him to find someone else. But something in me, curiosity, arrogance, exhaustion, maybe a part of me that wanted to matter again, pulled me back for another shift. And that was how I stepped into the first circle of something I didn't understand yet. Something that had been waiting for me. Something that was far from done. My second night on the job should have felt easier, familiar, predictable even. People adapt quickly to fear when they want something badly enough, and I wanted stability, structure, a reason to get out of bed in the evening and know where I needed to be. I thought if I just followed the rules and ignored what I'd seen the night before, everything might settle into routine. But routine has no place in Milbrook Cemetery. The moment I stepped through the iron gates that night, the temperature dipped 10 degrees. Not gradually, not naturally. A sudden drop, like someone had opened a freezer door and invited me inside. My breath fogged even though the weather app on my phone had read 52 degrees on the drive over. I tried to shake it off as I crossed the main path, gravel crunching beneath my boots. The cemetery looked different tonight, colder, still. Even the fog behaved differently, thicker, more purposeful, curling around headstones like fingers wrapping around a throat. The air felt heavy, charged with static, prickling against my skin. I told myself it was just nerves, but nerves didn't make an entire landscape feel like it was listening. I glanced toward the northern path and immediately regretted it. The fog parted just enough to reveal a faint shape, tall, silent, dressed in white. She was motionless, facing away from me, her posture rigid. Her hair hung long and straight, dark against the pale fabric as if absorbing all the light around her. She didn't move, didn't turn, didn't even breathe. Rule 2 echoed in my mind. Ignore her. Do not speak. Do not follow. I forced myself to look away, to move, to breathe. But the memory of her presence clung to me with a weight I couldn't shake. My shift officially started with a walkthrough of the perimeter. Check gates, check fence lines, check for signs of intrusion or vandalism. The usual things you'd expect from a night groundskeeper job. I welcomed the monotony, the predictability, the sense of control. But it didn't take long to realize this place was rewriting the definition of control. The west fence was intact, the south gate locked, the chapel doors secured. So far, everything was normal. Too normal, maybe. By the time I reached the east side, the air felt heavier again. Thicker, colder. I could feel it before I even saw what lay ahead. The Rowan Mausoleum. Even from a distance, the building radiated cold like a living thing. The structure wasn't large, just a stone rectangle with a peaked roof and iron-banded doors, but it dominated the landscape the way a storm dominates a sky. The ground around it looked frostbitten, grass dull and silvered. A faint, shimmering fog clung to the steps leading up to the entrance. It wasn't anywhere near 2 a.m., yet the place already felt hungry. I turned away before I got too close. The rule was clear: avoid all contact during the danger hour. And though it wasn't that time yet, the mausoleum's presence made my skin crawl. I moved quickly back toward the center paths, trying to shake off the sensation of being watched. The flashlight beam felt small, swallowed by the darkness. My steps echoed strangely, one footfall sounding normal, the next muted, the following amplified louder than it should have been. Sound distortion. The first unmistakable sign that something was shifting. Then came the footsteps. Soft at first, barely audible, like small shoes pattering across stone. I spun around, flashlight slicing through the fog, sweeping across rows of gravestones. Nothing. The footsteps continued behind me. I turned again. Nothing. The sound stopped the moment I stopped, continued when I resumed walking, always behind me, always one step late, like a child trying to mimic my pace without being caught. My heart hammered against my ribs, but some part of me, some stubborn, worn-down part of me, from decades of crisis response, forced me forward, forced me to go through the motions, forced me to pretend I wasn't being shadowed by something unseen. I reached grave 214. The oak tree overhead looked worse tonight, bark peeling, branches stripped bare, as if the thing was aging and fast forward. I leaned down to count the flowers. 7 lilies. Last night there had been 5. Fresh petals, dew still clinging to them, but the ground around the grave was disturbed again. Not footprints this time, handprints, small, pressed into the soft soil like a child trying to push herself out from beneath. I stepped back fast, the flashlight trembling, my breath hitched. The hum in the air rose again, electric, tense, familiar. She was close. I didn't see her, not yet, but I felt her. The hum sharpened, then drifted, then wrapped around me like static-charged air. I tried to focus on the notebook, flipping the page to jot the number 7. My handwriting shook so badly the 7 looked more like a question mark. That's when I heard it, a whisper, not a child's voice this time, something softer, older. A woman speaking so quietly I could barely discern the words, but the tone was unmistakable, grieving, weary, yearning. I froze. The whisper came again, not from the north path, not from the mausoleum, from somewhere just behind my left shoulder. I forced myself not to turn. Rule 2 screamed in my head like a fire alarm. After the first night's encounter, I had no desire to see her face. Instead, I took a slow step backward. The whisper followed. I took another. The whisper grew clearer, stronger, more desperate, until finally a low moan drifted through the graves. Not a human sound, something deeper, something ancient. My survival instinct kicked in hard. I moved fast, walking south until the hum softened and the air lifted. Only when I felt the weight lessen did I risk looking back. Nothing. Just rows of marble and fog. I wasn't alone anymore. That much was clear. Whether it was the woman in white or something else, something unseen was tracking me, testing me, watching. I made it back to the maintenance shed by 1:30 a.m. and leaned against the workbench, trying to get my breathing under control. The shed was warmer tonight, unnaturally so. The lights glowed steady overhead, no flickering, no buzzing, almost peaceful. But peace doesn't last here. It never did. The radio on my belt crackled suddenly. One sharp burst, then silence. Another crackle, a breathy static hiss. Then a voice, soft, high, childlike. "I saw you tonight." I dropped the radio. It clattered across the concrete floor, echoing through the shed. I didn't want to pick it up. Every instinct screamed to leave it there, to consider it broken, to claim interference or bad wiring or any excuse at all. But when the static hiss returned, followed by a small giggle that fluttered like wings against my ear, I forced myself to retrieve it. "Who is this?" I whispered. No answer, just a faint sound, like fingernails tapping against glass. Tap, 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 then, "Come find me." My hand went cold, my throat tightened, every part of my body rebelled, and yet, beneath the fear, something else flickered. Recognition. The sobbing from the mausoleum, the candle on my workbench last night, the footsteps following me, and now this voice, the girl, Annie Rowan. Though I didn't know her name yet, I felt it. A story forming beneath the surface, pressing upward like roots breaking through soil. She knew me, and she was getting stronger. I needed answers. I needed logic. I needed truth. Something to anchor myself. So I did the only thing that made sense. I went back to work, sticking to the rules as if my life depended on them, because I was beginning to think it did. Around 2:10 a.m., the air shifted again. The wind died. The fog settled. The temperature dropped fast enough to sting my eyes. Every instinct screamed for me to get away from the eastern side of the grounds. The Rowan Mausoleum was waking up. Sound travels differently during the danger hour. It stretches, it warps, it bends around you in ways that don't make sense. The grass crackled beneath a layer of frost so thick it looked like snow. The flashlight beam dimmed, as if the darkness were swallowing it whole. I felt the cold before I saw the building. Not ordinary cold, something deeper. A cold that resonated inside the bones, not outside the skin. A cold that made the world feel like it was shrinking. And then the first breath of wind drifted through the air. Except it wasn't wind, it was humming. A child's humming. Soft, off-key, familiar. The same melody I'd heard from inside the mausoleum the night before. And she was closer now. Closer than she should have been. 3 headstones away. 2. 1. I stumbled backward, fighting the urge to run. The humming grew louder, wrapping around me like a rope, tugging me toward the mausoleum, toward her. I pressed my back against a tree and clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The humming drifted past me, circling slowly, purposefully, searching. If she found me, if she saw me, what would she do? I didn't know, but the air told me everything I needed. She wasn't looking for help. She was looking for company. The kind that doesn't leave. I stayed pressed against that tree for what felt like hours, though my watch insisted only a couple of minutes had passed. The humming drifted ahead of me, wandering through the gravestones with a rhythm that was strangely steady, like a music box winding down. Every note was soft, innocent, even sweet, but twisted by the cold until it sounded wrong, like a child singing through water, like something meant to comfort turned into something meant to bind. I didn't dare move until the sound faded completely. When the silence finally returned, it wasn't a relief. It was an absence, a vacuum, the stillness that follows a dangerous animal disappearing into tall grass. You don't know where it went. You only know it's still nearby. My hands shook so badly I dropped the flashlight twice on my way back to the main path. The beam jittered across the stones, slicing through fog and shadow, but illuminating nothing that explained the humming or why it followed me. Even the graves seemed to lean inward, pulling closer as if listening. Back at the shed, the heat inside hit me like a wave. Almost too warm, like someone had turned up a furnace. My cheeks stung from the temperature shift. I peeled off the heavy coat and hung it on a hook, pacing the length of the shed, with my hands in my hair, trying to think, trying to breathe. My mind raced through the night like a film projector skipping frames. The woman in white, the handprints at grave 214, the voice on the radio, the humming, the frost creeping across the grounds hours before the danger window. Every piece of it pointed to one thing. Something was escalating, something was waking up. And whatever it was, it had noticed me. I tried to distract myself by checking equipment, flashlight batteries, radio connection, lockbox for the personal items. But the moment I touched the lockbox handle, a jolt of cold shot through my palm. Not metal cold, bone cold. The same cold that radiated from the mausoleum. I dropped the lockbox, stumbling a step back. When it hit the floor, the clang echoed unnaturally loud, the sound stretching a second too long, a delay like it traveled through more than air. The radio popped again on my belt, a burst of static, then tap, 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 a child's fingers on glass. I swallowed hard and forced myself to answer. "Who are you?" My voice shook despite my best effort. Silence, then barely audible. "You saw me." My throat tightened. "Where are you?" Another tap, then the voice. "Here." The shed light flickered once, then twice, then went out. Dark, pitch, suffocating dark. I froze, gripping the flashlight with both hands, thumb trembling over the switch. When I flicked it on, the beam cut a narrow path through the black. Something moved. Not far, just enough. A small shape ducked behind the row of lockers. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard my knees weakened. I lifted the beam, scanning the floor. There, small prints, wet, muddy, leading from the doorway to the lockers, about the size of a child's, the exact tread pattern I'd seen last night in my apartment. I backed up slowly until I hit the wall. Cold air poured into the shed as if someone had opened the door, but the door was shut. The windows were shut. Everything was shut. The small shape moved again, just a flicker of motion before vanishing from the beam's reach. My flashlight sputtered, then went out. Silence swallowed the shed. Silence and breathing, not mine, soft, shallow, fragile, a child's breath, very close. I didn't move, couldn't. Even breathing felt dangerous. The cold grew sharper, sliding down my spine, curling around my ribs like icy fingers. Something brushed against my calf, light, barely there, like someone touching me to make sure I was real. My fight-or-flight instinct misfired, sending a bolt of raw panic through my chest. I pivoted, fumbling for the door, nearly tripping over my own boots. When I finally shoved the door open, warm air hit me like a slap. I stumbled outside, gasping, the flashlight clattering to the ground beside me. As soon as the door swung shut again, the temperature returned to normal. The night sounds returned. The cold vanished. But when I picked up the flashlight and shined it on the shed door, my stomach dropped. A handprint, small, smudged in dark, wet earth, right at the height of a 7-year-old child. I didn't go back inside the shed for the rest of my shift. Instead, I walked the outer perimeter twice, then paced the chapel steps until sunrise burned through the fog. Every shadow felt watchful, every breeze carried a whisper, every sound behind me made my spine arch like a threatened animal. At 6:50 a.m., the first hint of sunlight crept across the grass. Frost melted, fog lifted, birds returned. It was the first breath I'd taken in hours that didn't taste like fear. At 7, I made my way toward the administration building. My boots felt heavier with each step, like the earth didn't want me to leave. When I pushed open the door to the basement office, Mr. Dalka was already at his desk, hands folded, posture straight, as if he'd been waiting for me. He didn't say good morning, didn't ask how the shift went. He just lifted his eyes to mine and saw everything. You encountered something, he said. I didn't reply. He didn't need me to. He gestured toward the chair across from him. I sat slowly, the notebook still tucked under my arm, the fear still clinging to my clothes like smoke. What did you hear? He asked quietly. The question startled me. Not what did you see? What did you hear? I heard humming, I said, and footsteps, and something in the shed. The child, he murmured. My breath caught. What child? He ignored the question, or pretended to. Instead, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. It was old, yellowed around the edges, stuffed with papers. Newspaper clippings, police reports, photographs. The name across the tab made my skin prickle. Rowan Annie, 1986. He kept it closed. His fingers rested on the cover like he was afraid to open it. She knows you now, he said. She's taken notice. Once she does that, she rarely looks away. I stared at him, searching for something. Sanity, explanation, reassurance. But his eyes were flat and tired. A man living in truth so long he'd forgotten the luxury of denial. What does she want? I whispered. He hesitated, then said the words I will never forget. Company. My pulse stumbled. Company? Annie has been alone for decades, he said. She seeks what she remembers, what she misses, what she lost. Sometimes that comes across as innocence, sometimes as confusion, sometimes as attachment. My stomach twisted. She followed me, he nodded. She follows those who disturb the balance, those who enter her space, those who see her, even indirectly. I didn't see her, I insisted. You acknowledged her, he said simply, and that is enough. A chill crawled down my arms, the small handprints on the grave, the candle on the bench, the voice on the radio, the humming in the dark, the footprints inside the shed, all of it threading together into a chilling pattern. You knew this would happen, I said. He didn't flinch. Yes. Why didn't you warn me? He leaned back with a sigh that carried years of regret. Because warnings rarely change outcomes here, and because the cemetery has its own selections. It chooses who becomes part of its story. I didn't know what to say. Anger, fear, confusion, everything tangled together. But beneath all that pulsed a deeper feeling, one I couldn't ignore. Pity. For a girl whose life ended too early. For a soul trapped in the quiet of her own birthday. For a child who hummed through the night because she didn't know how to be heard. Dalka watched me with a weary expression, a man who had seen others spiral long before I arrived. You must prepare, he said softly. The attention may fade, or it may grow stronger. It depends on the night, on the hour, on the connection. I shook my head. Connection? I don't want a connection. Sometimes, he said, the wanting doesn't matter. He pushed the Rowan file toward me. I didn't touch it. I'm not ready for that, I whispered. His mouth pulled into something like a sad smile. You will be, sooner than you'd like. I stood, the notebook tucked tight against my chest. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a faint flicker. As I reached the door, he called out one last thing. Ethan, I turned. Tonight, he said, do not go near the east grounds. My throat closed. The mausoleum. Yes, he said quietly, especially tonight. I didn't ask why. I didn't have to. The cold already knew. By the time I drove home after that second night, it felt like every mile of road between the cemetery and my apartment was shrinking. Like the distance itself was thinning. The sky over Milbrook seemed darker than it should have been. a bruise-colored smear stretching across the early morning. My truck engine rattled in a rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest, and every shadow flickering across the windshield made me grip the wheel harder. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Exhaustion, stress, lack of sleep, all the usual excuses a rational mind reaches for when the world no longer behaves rationally. But something in me, something instinctive, primal, kept replaying Dalka's words over and over. She knows you now. And the voice on the radio, that soft hum, that fragile giggle, those tapping sounds like small fingers against glass. When I pulled into the lot of my apartment building, the sun had finally climbed high enough to burn the fog from the streets. Normal noises returned. Garbage trucks, barking dogs, a neighbor slamming a car door. Life looked ordinary again, familiar, safe. But I didn't feel safe. I felt watched. Still, I forced myself into the routine, locked the door behind me, kicked off my boots, hung my coat by the entryway. Little rituals meant to make the world feel predictable again. But when I stepped into the living room, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not peaceful silence. Waiting silence. The kind that swallows everything it's given. I set the notebook down on the counter and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I felt it. The cold spot. A perfect circle of frigid air hovering by the fridge. Not a draft, not a temperature drop, a presence. My breath fogged in front of my face. Slowly, cautiously, I reached out a hand. The moment my fingers entered that cold pocket, an electric sting shot across my skin, raising goosebumps all the way to my elbow. I stepped back quickly, too quickly. My knee hit the cabinet, and the noise echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the faint imprint on the stainless steel door of the refrigerator. A smear shaped unmistakably like a small hand. 5 tiny fingers pressed flat as though someone or something had steadied itself there. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tightening so hard it hurt to swallow. The imprint wasn't old, it wasn't faded, it wasn't subtle. It glistened slightly, as if made recently, maybe minutes ago, maybe seconds. My apartment felt suddenly smaller, the shadows in each corner deeper. The air hummed faintly, that same soft vibration I'd heard in the cemetery. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me not to turn around. But with fear comes curiosity, and curiosity is a dangerous thing when your mind insists on explaining the unexplainable. I flicked on the hallway light and moved toward the bedroom. The moment I stepped through the doorway, my foot slid on something. Paper, several sheets. Crayons rolled quietly across the floor. Drawings, dozens of them, each one childlike. Bright colors, uneven lines, stick figures. Some showed the cemetery. Some showed the mausoleum. Some showed the long northern path, with the woman in white shimmering like a thin veil of smoke. But one drawing stopped me completely. It showed a small figure with blonde hair wearing a white dress. Next to her was a taller figure drawn in dark green crayon, the same color jacket I wore to work. They were holding hands. Below them, written in careful block letters, "Come home with me." My stomach twisted. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over the pile. My pulse hammered, my vision narrowing as I dropped to my knees and grabbed the drawing with shaking hands. It wasn't messy like a child's doodle. It was deliberate, focused, emotional. That was the moment I understood. She wasn't just following me, she was choosing me. I grabbed my phone and walked outside onto the small balcony, desperate for air that didn't taste like fear. The morning sun felt too warm, too bright, wrong, somehow, after everything I'd just seen. I called Marcus Reed, the nighttime perimeter guard at Milbrook, one of the only people I half trusted there. He answered on the second ring. "You all right, Cole?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "No," I breathed. I don't think so. What happened?" "She was here," I whispered, "in my apartment." Silence, not the confused kind, the knowing kind. Then Marcus exhaled sharply. "Tell me exactly what you saw." I paced the small balcony as I told him everything, the drawings, the cold spot, the handprint. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words quivered anyway, tumbling out too fast. When I finished, Marcus didn't speak. "Say something," I demanded, my voice brittle. "I saw her," he finally said. "Saturday night." I froze. "What?" "Section D. You were walking your route and she was right beside you." My breath hitched. "Beside me?" "Like a shadow," he said. "I called out to you, but you didn't hear me. I thought it was a kid who wandered in. But when I looked closer," his voice dropped. "She wasn't solid. Not fully." I pressed my fingers into my temple, trying to make sense of the words. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to believe it," he said. "And because I thought maybe she was just passing by. Spirits do that sometimes. But if she's in your home now..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. Fear settled like a weight in my chest. Heavy, suffocating. Marcus cleared his throat. "Listen, man. Dalka may act like he's got all the answers, but he doesn't, or he won't give them. You need to talk to Elena on the day crew." "Why?" "She's been finding things," he said. "Stuff nobody wants to talk about. Decorations, balloons, notes. Same spot every morning." "Birthday things," I whispered, remembering the candle and the presents in the mausoleum. "Yeah," he said. "Exactly." After we hung up, I didn't go back inside right away. Instead, I stayed on the balcony, staring out at the road, watching people go about their ordinary, uncomplicated lives. A mother pushing a stroller, a teenager jogging, an old man watering his plants. None of them had any idea what was creeping through the dark corners of their town, what was humming through the cemetery at night, what was reaching into my home. When I finally stepped back inside, the drawings were still scattered across the bedroom floor. I gathered them slowly, hands trembling despite my efforts to steady them. The crayon marks felt fresh beneath my fingers, soft and waxy. Some of the drawings had smudges, little streaks where a child's hand might have brushed the page while coloring, but one drawing was different from the rest. It showed only the mausoleum, and written beneath it, "This is where we'll be together." My chest tightened. I tried to tell myself it was a threat, but something in the way the letters curved, soft, uneven, yearning, told me it wasn't. It was a promise. I needed answers. I needed clarity. I needed something to explain all of this before my mind fractured under the weight of it. So despite every warning sign, despite the fear twisting through me, I returned to the one place that offered answers, the cemetery itself. That night, when I clocked in, the air felt wrong from the moment I stepped through the gates. Heavy, thick. The fog didn't roll along the ground like usual. It hovered, suspended, like a curtain waiting to be pulled aside. The oak trees groaned in the distance. The chapel bell gave a single sharp clang, even though no wind touched it. The cemetery was awake, and it was expecting me. I went straight to the maintenance building. Elena Briggs stood inside, sorting through bags of gardening supplies. When she turned, her face went pale. "You look like hell," she said softly. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Marcus said you've been finding things." Her expression shifted, fear mixed with resignation, the look of someone who'd been waiting for this conversation. "Come with me," she said. She led me past the tool racks, out behind the shed, into a narrow stretch of grass between two oaks. Morning sunlight barely reached there during the day, and at night it felt like standing in the throat of a cave. She pointed at the base of the left tree. "This is where I find them," she murmured. At first I saw nothing. Then I stepped closer and froze. A balloon lay in the grass, pink, shiny, perfect, fully inflated, its ribbon tied neatly around a root. Beside it was a birthday streamer, pale blue with silver stars, a small card, a plastic tiara, a handful of confetti that shimmered like fresh foil. These weren't weathered decorations. They were new, placed recently. Elena swallowed hard. "Every morning," she whispered, "always something different, always birthday things. I collect them, bag them, toss them out, and by the next morning, more appear." I finished for her. She nodded, her voice trembling. "And the trash bags I throw out, they disappear." I knelt down, touching the ribbon of the balloon. It felt warm, as if it had just been held, as if tiny fingers had tied it. A faint humming drifted across the grounds, barely audible, floating through the still air like a lullaby carried on fog. Not near us, not far, just everywhere. I stood slowly, the hair on my arms rising in a wave. "She's celebrating," I whispered. "Who?" Elena asked, sounding afraid to hear the answer. The ground beneath my boots felt suddenly colder, softer, as though something was stirring beneath the soil. "A girl," I said quietly. "A little girl named Annie." I felt the name leave my mouth like a stone tossed into dark water. The humming paused. The fog shifted. The air tightened. And something in the cemetery listened. The moment Annie's name passed my lips, the cemetery changed. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. No thunder, no shaking earth, no voices from the sky. Just a subtle, suffocating shift in the air pressure, like the entire world inhaled at once and forgot how to exhale. Elena must have felt it too, because she took a step back, her eyes darting around the grounds with a fear she didn't bother hiding. "You shouldn't say names out loud here," she whispered, "especially not names tied to the Rowan family." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Dalka mentioned her, or hinted at her. "He wouldn't tell me everything." "He never does," she said. "He thinks it protects us." Her voice trembled as she glanced at the tree again. The pink balloon wavered slightly, even though no breeze touched it. "Come on," she said in a tight voice. "Let's go inside before—" But she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. A soft giggle drifted through the air. Not mean, not mocking, just playful. But hearing it in a graveyard at night froze my blood all the same. The giggle echoed once, then stopped abruptly, like someone clapped a hand over a child's mouth. Elena grabbed my sleeve and dragged me back toward the shed. Once inside, she slammed the door behind us and locked it. The lock clicked, echoing too loudly in the cramped space. The fluorescent lights flickered once, but stayed on. Elena leaned against a shelf, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Don't say her name again," she said under her breath. "Names are anchors. They're invitations." I nodded slowly, trying to wrap my mind around that. "But you know about her." "I know enough. Ray Holt, your predecessor, talked about her more than he should have. Once someone acknowledges her, Her voice faltered. "She takes interest." "She was in my home," I whispered. Elena's face went white. Already, I nodded. Then this is worse than I thought, she said, pacing. She's attached to you. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and broken. You sound like you're talking about a stray dog. I'm talking about a spirit, she snapped. One that doesn't understand boundaries, one that doesn't understand death. She rubbed her forehead, thinking hard. Tell me exactly what happened at your apartment. So I did. All of it. The handprints, the drawings, the cold spot, the humming, the sense of being watched long after the sun had risen. Elena listened, silent, her knuckles whitening around the clipboard. When I finished, her mouth tightened. You need to talk to Mr. Dalka in the morning, she said. He has records, journals, files he never shows anyone unless things get bad. Things are already bad, I said. Why not tell me before? Because people quit when they hear the truth. Her voice grew distant. Some go mad, others disappear. I stared at her. Disappear. She didn't elaborate. That alone told me everything I needed to know. A loud thud hit the shed wall behind us. We both jumped. The lights flickered 3 times. Thud, 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 small, precise, like a tiny fist tap in wood. Elena shook her head, eyes squeezed shut. Don't react, she whispered. The tapping grew louder, faster, more impatient. Thud, 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 thud. The cold swept through the shed again. My breath fogged. The radio on the shelf crackled with static. Papers fluttered like invisible fingers skimmed across them. Tap, 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 right behind me now. I didn't turn, couldn't. Some instinct, the same one that had kept me alive through 2 decades of paramedic work, told me not to look. Looking would make it real. Looking would be acknowledgement, and acknowledgement was invitation. But then the voice came. Why did you run? Soft, hurt, confused, a child's voice, just inches from my ear. I squeezed my eyes shut so tightly, my skull throbbed, my pulse hammered, roaring in my ears. Elena stood perfectly still, her chest barely moving as though she were trying to hide from the air itself. The voice came again. You saw my drawings, you saw my house. My hand trembled at my side. I didn't answer, couldn't. Come back, the voice said. We can finish the game. The temperature dropped even further. The metal shelves began to frost over. The flashlight on the bench flickered, pale white light flashing in irregular pulses. Please, she whispered. The word wasn't a threat. It was a plea, and that somehow terrified me more. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the cold lifted. The tapping stopped. The lights steadied. Silence settled in, heavy and thick, like dust after an explosion. Elena finally exhaled. She's getting stronger, she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. My jaw felt locked. And she's not just haunting the cemetery anymore. Elena swallowed. She's crossing boundaries. She followed me home, I said, more to myself than to her. She will again, Elena replied. And she'll get bolder each time. Spirits that attach emotionally become persistent, especially children who died suddenly. They cling to what they can't understand. What does she want? I asked. Elena hesitated. When she finally answered, her voice cracked. She wants someone to stay. A chill crawled through me. With her? Or for her, Elena murmured. Attachment isn't logical, it's need, and she has needed for a very long time. We stood in silence for a moment longer before Elena straightened, regaining a sliver of composure. Come on, she said. We need to check Section B before sunrise. If she's manifesting this strongly, there might be signs. Signs? The last time I heard that word in this context, a man was dying in the back of my ambulance. Still, I followed her. A part of me hoped that the fresh air outside would clear my head, that stepping beyond the shed would sever whatever invisible thread Annie had tied around me. It didn't. The moment we stepped outside, I felt her again. A soft brushing sensation, like small hands reaching for mine, a faint hum beneath the wind, the world around me growing slightly out of sync, colors too sharp in some places, muted in others. We walked toward Section B. As we neared, Elena pointed ahead. "Look." It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the fog, but once they did, I saw them. Balloons. 5 of them this time, tied to different gravestones. Their strings swayed gently even though the air was still. One balloon was shaped like a number 7. Another had cartoon animals. Another had pink flowers. Beneath each balloon sat a small gift box, wrapped carefully, thoughtfully, with precise folds, curling ribbons, and tiny hand-drawn hearts on several corners. I approached one slowly. The wrapping paper was soft beneath my fingers. The tape sealing it had no fingerprints, no flaws, no smudges. But the ribbon was warm, as if a child had tied it only moments earlier. "She cares about detail," Elena whispered. I blinked. "She?" Elena nodded. "Spirits that cling to earthly rituals often maintain them with focus, precision. Childhood memories are the strongest. Birthdays, traditions, gifts." I stared at the boxes, dread settling deeper into my bones. "She's recreating something." "A celebration," Elena murmured. "But she's missing people, missing someone." I knelt to pick up one of the boxes. Elena reached out quickly. "Don't open it." "Why not?" "Because it's not for you," she said. "And opening it means you accept the gift." "Accepting the gift does what?" She hesitated. "It deepens the connection." I dropped the box like it burned me. My flashlight flickered. The fog shifted. Something moved between the gravestones, just a flash of white, small, darting. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Another giggle sliced through the fog. Closer this time, too close. I turned slowly, my breath caught. At the edge of the path, partially hidden by an old willow, someone stood, small, still, facing us. A little girl in a white dress, hair in soft, uneven pigtails, hands clasped in front of her like she'd been waiting for us, for me. Her face was blurred by shadow, but her outline was unmistakable. Annie Rowan, the girl who died on her 7th birthday, the girl who never left. My heart slammed so violently I thought it might crack my ribs. The flashlight shook in my hand. Elena's breath hitched beside me. "Don't move," she whispered, barely audible. But staying still was impossible. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to flee, to do anything except stand there like prey. And yet I couldn't move, not from fear, from recognition. Annie tilted her head slightly, then lifted one hand and waved. Not playfully, not threateningly, just a small, hopeful wave, as if I were someone she had been waiting years to see. My knees weakened. I had to brace myself against a nearby headstone. Annie took one small step forward. The fog parted around her feet. The temperature plunged again, and frost instantly spiderwebbed across the grass in front of her. "Ethan!" Elena whispered urgently. "Don't respond, don't talk, don't acknowledge." But Annie lifted her other arm. In her hand was a drawing, folded neatly, held out toward me, just like a child presenting something to a parent. A gift, a gesture, an invitation. My throat tightened. My eyes stung, not from fear this time, from something deeper, something painful, something human. She wasn't trying to hurt me, she was trying to reach me, and that somehow terrified me more. The flashlight flickered violently, the fog thickened, the wind shifted. Then as suddenly as she appeared, Annie's small form unraveled into mist, dissolving into the night like she'd never been there at all. But the drawing she held out, it lay at my feet, face down, as if placed gently, not dropped, not blown. Placed. I stared at it, unable to breathe. Then slowly, I knelt and picked it up. The paper was warm between my fingers. On the front was a crayon drawing of two figures holding hands under a floating cluster of balloons. One was Annie, the other was me. And beneath it, written in careful block letters, "Come find me." The drawing stayed in my hand long after the fog swallowed the last trace of Annie's figure. For several minutes, I couldn't move, could barely think. All I could do was stare at the waxy crayon lines and feel the warmth lingering on the page, as if her small hands had held it only seconds earlier. Elena's voice broke through the stillness. "We need to go. Now." She grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the balloons, away from the frost creeping along the ground, away from the remnants of a celebration that never ended. My legs finally remembered how to move. We didn't run. Running draws attention in a place like Milbrook, and attention is a currency you don't want to spend here. But we moved quickly and silently, our footsteps echoing too loudly on the gravel path. Inside the maintenance shed, Elena locked the door behind us and pulled down the blinds. She paced the narrow aisle twice, clutching the clipboard against her chest. "She showed herself to you," she said, "fully, not a shadow, not a suggestion. That means she trusts you." "That's not trust," I whispered. "That's attachment." "It's the same thing for her." I didn't like the way she said that, as if attachment wasn't a choice for Annie, as if it was instinct, a force, a tether formed somewhere between grief and longing, a bond she didn't know how to let go of. I sat on the metal bench and unfolded the drawing again. Annie's small figure was smiling in the picture, wide, bright, almost glowing. My figure was taller but drawn with the same care, the same soft strokes of green. It wasn't a threat, not the way a child's scribble could be twisted into something sinister. It was hopeful, lonely, desperate. "We should tell Dalka," I said. Elena hesitated. "You can. I won't." "Why not?" "Because he already knows," she sighed. "He's known since the day you started. The cemetery chooses who it reveals itself to, who becomes part of the story. Annie doesn't show herself to everyone, only the ones she clings to." "Why me?" Elena didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did and didn't want to say it. Before I could push her further, a sudden scraping sound sliced through the quiet. Both of us froze. The sound came again, not inside the shed, above it, slow, careful steps on the metal roof. Elena mouthed a silent curse and switched off the overhead lights. We stood in the dim blue glow of the emergency bulb, listening. Every hair on my body stood on end. Step, step, step. The steps weren't heavy. They weren't adult steps. They were light, barefoot, small, a child's weight. The metal creaked as she moved, the sound stretching in the stillness until it felt like a blade pressed against my spine. "She's looking for you," Elena whispered. My chest tightened. "She followed us." "No, she followed you." The steps stopped directly above me. Silence. Then tap, tap. 2 small knocks right above where I stood. My breath hitched. My heart pounded so loud I thought the whole building could hear it. Tap. One more. Soft. Hesitant. A request. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was trying to make contact. The roof groaned as the weight lifted, the metal settling back into place. A faint giggle mingled with the wind. Then silence returned, real and complete. Elena's shoulders sagged as if she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "This is getting out of hand." "It's already out of hand," I said. "She was on the roof." "The roof." Elena rubbed her temples. "You need the journals." "What journals?" Her eyes flicked toward the far shelf. "The ones Dalka doesn't let people read. The Rowan journals." My pulse quickened. "They're here?" "Some, not all. He keeps the originals locked in the administration basement, but copies were made years ago before he took over. Things have been passed between staff for decades." She knelt beside an old filing cabinet and unlocked the bottom drawer with a key from her necklace. Inside were old binders wrapped in plastic, worn from handling. She slid one out. "Rowan Family, 1986-1991. The cover alone made my skin crawl. A faded photograph of the mausoleum was taped to the front. In the picture, frost clung to the stone like veins. The doorway yawned open, dark and empty. I swallowed hard. "What's in these?" "Everything," Elena said. "What happened to Annie? What happened to her mother? The first manifestations, the rituals, the days when this place wasn't just haunted, it was alive." I stared at the binder, dread curling through me. Some part of me wanted to shove it back into the drawer and slam it shut. Pretend none of this existed. Pretend I could just walk away, quit, forget. But the drawing in my hand said otherwise. "She won't let you walk away," Elena said softly, reading my expression. "Not now." I opened the binder. Dust puffed out, carrying a faint scent. Earth, paper, something sweet like old frosting. The first page was a newspaper clipping. "Local girl, age 7, struck by lightning and freak storm, April 15th, 1986. A black and white photo of Annie Rowan stared back at me. Pigtails, missing tooth, wide grin, a child frozen in time. My throat tightened. Another clipping. Rowan groundskeeper found dead in mausoleum, November 1986. Her mother, the woman who never recovered, the woman who tried to bridge two worlds to bring her daughter back. I flipped the page, then another, and another. The binder was filled with journal entries, sketches, temperature charts, hand-drawn diagrams of the mausoleum, notes about cold spots, sightings, voices, patterns of manifestation, behavioral analysis like someone had been tracking the habits of a living creature. But one page hit me harder than the rest. A crude, childlike drawing taped to a journal entry, 2 stick figures holding hands, one small, one tall. Above them, the words, "I miss you, Mommy." My vision blurred. The page shook in my hands. Elena placed a hand on my shoulder, not comforting exactly, but grounding. "She doesn't understand she's gone," Elena said quietly. "She doesn't understand why no one comes to her birthday, why no one stays, why everyone leaves. And she thinks I—" "What?" My voice broke. "Can replace her mother?" "Not replace," Elena said. "Fill the silence." The weight of that sentence settled inside me like a stone. I turned the page again. A photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I picked it up and nearly dropped it. It showed the maintenance shed, the roof, and a blur of white crouched low near the edge. Not a person, not a shape, a smear, like something moving too fast for the camera to capture. The caption on the back chilled me. "She waits for who she chooses." My mouth went dry. This is real, all of it." "It's always been real," Elena said. I stood slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the shed's small window, eyes shadowed, shoulders tense, every muscle coiled with a fear I couldn't hide. "She won't stop," I whispered. No, Elena agreed. She won't. The lights flickered again. A soft, rhythmic tapping began at the nearest window. Slow, gentle, insistent. Elena grabbed my arm. Don't look. But my eyes betrayed me before she even finished the sentence. I looked at the window, at the small, pale hand pressed flat against the glass, at the faint outline of a face just beyond the reflection. A child, watching, waiting, and smiling. Not a malicious smile, a hopeful one. The smile of a little girl waiting for someone she loves to open the door. The small handprint on the window didn't fade. It stayed perfectly pressed against the glass, fingers slightly splayed, palm flat, like she expected someone to match it. For a long moment neither Elena nor I breathed. The world outside the shed was unnaturally still. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant hum from town. Just that hand, just her. My heart hammered so loudly I could hear the pulse in my ears. The air thickened around us, heavy and cold, like the shed was no longer a building but a sealed chamber. I could feel her presence, not threatening but insistent, like the gravity of a planet pulling me closer. She wants you, Elena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Do not open that door. I wasn't planning to, I murmured. But the truth was, some part of me, some irrational, instinctive part, wanted to. Not to escape the fear, not to surrender. But because in that moment, that small hand at the window didn't feel like a ghost trying to take something. It felt like a child trying to be seen, trying not to be alone. The tapping began again, soft and rhythmic. Each tap precisely spaced like the beat of a small, patient heart. Tap, tap, tap. My knees went weak. I braced myself against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. I can't stay here, I said. Not like this. I need answers. Elena shook her head. Not tonight. This is her strong hour. Spirits tied to trauma always have peak windows. This is hers. The moon's position, the cemetery's layout, the anniversary energy. The anniversary? I asked sharply. It's not April yet. No, she said, but spirits don't track time like we do. They feel seasons, patterns, the way the air changes, the way the ground shifts. She's building momentum, drawing closer to the date. She's preparing. For what? For you. The words struck me like a gut punch. I looked at the binder again. The pages filled with Annie's world, her drawings, her childish handwriting, her mother's desperate notes. Felt heavier now. The story wasn't just history. It was living. It was reaching. It was pulling. A sudden gust of cold shot through the shed and extinguished the emergency light entirely. Darkness swallowed us whole. Elena cursed under her breath. I grabbed my flashlight, flicking it on. The beam shook as my hands trembled. The window was empty. The handprint remained. But the small figure was gone. Elena let out a shaky breath. She's moving again. Where? Before she could answer, the radio on my belt crackled. Not with static this time. Something else. Music, faint, warped. A music box melody, slow and uneven, like a toy winding down. I recognized it instantly. Happy birthday! My breath caught. Elena took a step back. Turn it off. I didn't turn it on. Then drop it, she said urgently. Let it play on the ground. But I didn't. The melody grew clearer, cleaner. A child's voice joined in, singing softly along with the warped tune. My birthday, my birthday. The flashlight flickered again. The cold deepened. A tightness wrapped around my ribs like invisible hands were trying to hold me still. She's calling you, Elena whispered. I know. You can't answer. I'm not. But you want to. She wasn't wrong. The voice on the radio was gentle, not aggressive, not cruel, just lonely, aching with years of waiting, and every note dug a little deeper under my skin. A sudden metallic clang rattled the entire shed. Both of us jumped. The second clang was louder, then another. Something was striking the outside walls. Not a fist, not a rock, something small, repetitive, fast. Tap, 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 like she was circling the shed, like she was tracing it with her fingers. The cold moved with her, sliding under the door, crawling up the walls, tightening around my throat. "Elena," I whispered, "we need to get out of here." "We can't," she snapped. "If we leave now, she'll follow you across the grounds. She'll chase you. She'll get stronger. Spirits like her, they thrive on movement." "She's already following me." "Not like this," Elena said, her voice trembling. "You haven't seen her angry. That child has not known peace for decades. And spirits who wander too far from their anchor—" "Anchor? The mausoleum," she said. "It holds her, contains her. It's her center. If she drifts too far, her energy shifts. Her form becomes unstable. She becomes desperate." The tapping stopped. Complete silence rang through the shed. "Elena," I whispered, what happens when she becomes desperate?" Before she could answer, the window fogged over from the outside. A small breath, a circle drawn in the condensation, then a heart, drawn slowly, lovingly. For me, my legs nearly gave out. Something inside me cracked open, a deep, painful empathy I didn't expect. This wasn't a malicious haunting. This was grief clawing through time. "She likes you," Elena whispered. "She doesn't want to hurt you." "That doesn't make her safe." "No," she agreed quietly. "It doesn't." The fog on the window cleared again, as if wiped away by a small palm. Then little shapes danced across the glass, smudged impressions skipping upward like footprints. She was climbing, up the wall, onto the roof. The metal creaked overhead. Then silence. A different sound came next, scratching, slow, cautious scraping on the metal like she was trying to find her way back down, no longer patient, no longer playful, searching. And then, "Ethan," my name, whispered from above. Not angry, not pleading, just expectant. Elena grabbed my wrist. "Don't respond, no matter what. If you acknowledge her voice directly, if you answer, that's a bond you might never break." My throat tightened. I pressed my lips together and held my breath as the whisper came again. "Ethan." The roof creaked under her weight. "Come find me." I closed my eyes, fighting the pull in her voice, the longing, the innocence, the need. Elena shook my shoulder gently. "Listen to me. Just a few more minutes and she'll weaken. Dawn breaks in less than an hour. Sunrise resets everything." But the whisper didn't weaken. It grew clearer. "Come find me." The roof groaned. Then something began sliding down the far edge. A soft thump. Footsteps. Small ones. Right outside the shed door. Elena gripped my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. If she steps inside, if she crosses a threshold, everything changes. The handle twitched. Once, twice, a third time. The door remained locked. The metal shuddered lightly, not from force, but from a small hand pressing against it. We waited, breaths shallow, hearts pounding. The pressure on the door eased. Silence stretched. Then a soft giggle drifted away into the fog. Light returned. The cold lifted like a curtain. Elena sagged against the wall. "She's gone." "For now," I said. "For now," she echoed. We stayed inside until the first streaks of sunlight cut through the fog. Dawn warmed the metal roof, melting the last crusts of frost. Birds returned. The air softened. The world felt normal again, even if I didn't. As we stepped outside, I glanced toward the eastern grounds. The Rowan mausoleum stood far off, framed by the rising sun. Its frost was gone, its shadow shorter, its stone walls still, and yet I felt Annie's eyes on me, watching, waiting. The bond wasn't broken, not even close. I should have gone home after sunrise, should have collapsed into bed, locked every door, covered every mirror, and told myself that whatever waited inside Milbrook Cemetery was still trapped behind its gates. But when I reached my truck, the sunlight warming the windshield, something stopped me cold. A drawing lay tucked beneath the wiper. I knew it was from her even before I touched it, before I saw the crayon lines, before the weight of it settled in my hand. It showed the mausoleum, wide open, warm light glowing from inside, and in the doorway, a small figure drawn in white crayon, holding a candle with 7 pink flames. Underneath, written with gentle, careful strokes, "Tonight." I stood there in the bright morning light, the breeze brushing my face, the birds singing overhead, and for the first time since this started, I felt the raw truth settle into my bones. She wasn't just waiting for me anymore. She was asking for me, calling for me, choosing me, and tonight, she expected me to answer. When I finally stepped into the administrative building, sunlight poured through the windows, but the warmth didn't reach the basement. The air grew colder again as I descended the concrete steps. Mr. Dalka was already at his desk, flipping through a stack of papers with the calm precision of a man who had lived inside tragedy long enough to accept its rules. Before I could speak, he looked up sharply. "She approached you last night." It wasn't a question. "She stood outside the shed," I said quietly. "She climbed onto the roof. She whispered my name." Dalka's jaw tightened. "She'll escalate again tonight." "And you knew this was coming." His silence was answer enough. My anger rose, not loud but heavy, a kind of anger born from fear and exhaustion, a feeling familiar from the worst nights of my paramedic days. Nights when you arrive at a scene knowing the person in front of you has been set up to fail, and there's nothing you can do but try to work backward from the damage. "You could have warned me," I said. "You wouldn't have believed me. I believe you now." "That," he said with a tired sigh, "is precisely what makes this dangerous." I pulled the drawing from my jacket and slid it across his desk. His hand hovered above it but didn't touch it. "She gave me this," I said. "She wants me at the mausoleum. Tonight." His face paled. "No, absolutely not. You told me not to go near the east grounds last night." "And yet she still came to me." "Because the boundary is thinning," he murmured. "The closer we get to April, the more she reaches. She's mourning, she's searching, and she's strong this year. Stronger than I've seen her in decades." I leaned forward. "Then tell me the truth. All of it." He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, suddenly appearing older than his 60-something years. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Annie Rowan did not die instantly." The room seemed to tilt slightly. My grip tightened on the armrests. "What are you talking about? The lightning strike?" "She was alive when they found her," he said. "Barely, weak, confused, repeating the same word." He swallowed. "Mommy." The word hit like a blow. "They rushed her into the mausoleum for shelter," he continued, "because the storm hadn't passed. They thought it would help her breathe. But the Rowan mausoleum, it was already charged with something older." I felt a cold shudder crawl up my spine. "Older?" "Milbrook was not built on empty land," he said. "There were rituals here long before this town existed. Sacred spaces, thin places, The Rowan family chose that mausoleum because they believed the land was blessed. But it wasn't. No, it was open. I stared at him, trying to piece together the implications. And Annie died inside it. He nodded. And her mother blamed herself. Mildred spent every night afterward trying to call her daughter back. She left gifts, letters, candles, birthdays. She believed repetition would echo across worlds. And it worked, I whispered. To a degree, he said sadly. Annie's spirit didn't return whole. It returned fractured, lost, caught between longing and fear, stuck in the ritual her mother created. Her birthday, I murmured. Every night in her world, Dalka said, is April 15th. A chill climbed the back of my neck. She expects celebration. She expects company. And this year, he hesitated. She's found someone she thinks can stand in the place her mother left empty. Me? Yes, and she won't stop until you step into her circle. My pulse quickened. What happens if I don't? She will come to your home again. She will follow you across town. She will start appearing in places she shouldn't be able to reach. He paused. And one night, she will ask you to go somewhere you cannot survive. The fear in his voice wasn't mystical or superstitious. It was clinical, earned, logical. What happens if I do go? I asked quietly. If I go tonight? Dalka's expression sank like a dying sun. Then you must not let her touch you, not physically, not emotionally, not spiritually. She already has, I said, feeling the truth of it in my bones. He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached beneath his desk and pulled out a smaller folder, much thinner than the others. It looked newer, cleaner, untouched. He slid it toward me. This, he said softly, is Mildred Rowan's final journal. My chest tightened. I thought you only had copies, I whispered. This one, he said, tapping the folder, is the only original I kept. Why? Because of what she wrote on the last page. He didn't open it. I did. The handwriting inside was shaky, jagged, a woman unraveling word by word. Lines crossed out, pages smeared, desperation etched into the margins. Most of it was incoherent. Until the final entry, a single sentence, a mother's final warning. She doesn't want a daughter, she wants a replacement. My breath stopped, not in my lungs, in my soul. She will take what she believes she deserves, Dalka said quietly, what she believes she lost. And if I don't give it willingly? His eyes met mine with a depth of sorrow that felt older than the earth beneath us. She will take you anyway. The words echoed in the cold room, settling into the silence like dust. Then Dalka spoke again, slower this time, like each syllable weighed on him. You are running out of nights, Ethan. I closed the journal. My hand shook, my jaw clenched. Something in me split open. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something that had been building since the first drawing appeared in my apartment. Purpose. I stood slowly. What do I do tonight? I asked. Not if. What? Dalka took a deep breath. You follow the rules. You stay outside the mausoleum. You do not answer if she calls your name, and you do not take anything she offers. But she wants me to go inside. She does, he whispered, and if you do, you won't come back. The weight of the truth settled in my chest. But, he continued, there may be one chance, one way to reach her, to end this without losing yourself. I stared at him. How? He nodded toward the last page of the journal, at the sentence beneath Mildred's warning, in smaller handwriting, shakier, almost impossible to read. She can be freed only by what she fears. What does she fear? I asked. Dalka hesitated. Then he whispered the last truth. Being forgotten. The room went silent, and in that moment, I understood. Tonight wasn't just the night she chose me. It was the night I would have to choose back. I left Dalka's office with the journal clutched tight against my chest, the final words echoing over and over like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. She can be freed only by what she fears, being forgotten. The simplicity of it felt impossible, cruel, like the universe had chosen the most devastating truth to bind a child's spirit to a place she couldn't escape. Annie wasn't clinging to the living because she wanted harm. She was clinging because she was terrified of what waited for her if she let go. Oblivion, silence, the dark. And tonight she expected me to step into her world and hold her there. But that wasn't what I was going to do. When I finally left the administration building, the sun sat low over the horizon. The shadows stretched long across the cemetery grounds, turning headstones into silhouettes and paths into dark veins threading through the earth. Tonight, the word pulsed through me with every step. Tonight she would reach for me. Tonight I had to choose a path none of us would come back from unchanged. I drove home, though I barely remember the ride. My mind replayed every moment, from the first flower count, to the woman in white, to the cold around the mausoleum, to Annie's drawings appearing in my apartment like invitations written in crayon and longing. When I opened the door, I expected the apartment to be different, changed, disturbed. It wasn't. It was perfectly still, which somehow made it worse. A single sheet of paper lay on the kitchen counter. I approached it slowly, heart hammering. The drawing was simple, a stick figure of me standing beside the mausoleum, a small stick figure of her holding a cake, and above us a line of text that felt like a hand closing around my throat. Don't forget me. I didn't remember placing my hands on the counter, but suddenly I was gripping the edge with white knuckles. I wanted to help her. God help me, I did. But saving someone trapped between worlds wasn't as simple as wanting it. It required truth, sacrifice, courage, and maybe a little cruelty. I left the drawing where it was. I couldn't look at it anymore, not if I wanted to do what needed to be done. Night fell too fast. The sun slipped behind the hills, and darkness poured into the town with the weight of something ancient. When I stepped outside again, I felt the shift immediately. The air was colder, heavier, charged. As if the whole world knew tonight was different. When I reached Milbrook's gates, they were open, not ajar. Open, swung wide like a mouth inviting me inside. A tremor ran through me, every instinct firing at once. Danger, warning, run. But I stepped forward anyway. My boots crunched over fallen leaves. The fog rose gently from the ground, curling around my legs like slender hands. She felt me. She knew I was here. The cemetery was silent, not peaceful, but suspended, like everything was holding its breath. Even the wind didn't move. Then, far off in the eastern grounds, a faint glow flickered, pink, warm, wavering. Candlelight, the mausoleum. I followed the narrow path toward it, each step heavier than the last. Memories of the first night I'd stood before that stone building surged back in a rush. The impossible candles, the presence from decades past, the handprint behind me, the sobbing in the shadows. Tonight, the door was already open. Warm light spilled across the grass. She was waiting inside. "Annie," I whispered under my breath, though I knew I shouldn't say her name. "I'm here." A soft giggle drifted from the entrance, a sound so pure, so childlike, it cracked something inside me. I approached slowly, the journal in my hand, the flashlight turned off. When I crossed the invisible threshold of Section C, the cold hit me like a wall. My breath fogged instantly, my fingers numbed. The ground itself seemed to resist my weight, but I kept walking. The closer I came, the clearer the scene became. 7 small candles arranged carefully atop a fresh cake. Bright pink frosting, plastic flowers. A little white plate set beside it, like a place reserved just for me, and behind it, a small silhouette. She stepped forward, and for the first time, I saw her fully, not a blur, not a reflection, not a flicker at the corner of vision. A little girl with braids and a soft white dress and eyes impossibly blue, bright even in the dim. She smiled shyly, clutching a small stuffed rabbit in her hands, one ear torn, one button eye missing. "You came," she whispered. Her voice wasn't twisted or haunting. It was gentle, hopeful, a child's plea tucked inside a breath. I swallowed hard. "I did." She stepped closer, holding the rabbit out toward me. "I saved him for you." My heart ached. Every part of me wanted to kneel down, take the rabbit, tell her she wasn't alone. But Dalka's warning burned through the fog in my mind. Do not take anything she offers. So I shook my head softly. "I can't." Her smile faltered. "But you're supposed to." "Mommy always—" "I'm not your mother, Annie." The words hit her like a strike. Her shoulders stiffened. The shadows inside the mausoleum seemed to pulse, breathing with her. "But you came back," she whispered. "You came just like she used to." "I came because I need to talk to you." She tilted her head slowly, confused, like she couldn't understand why my voice trembled. "You're forgetting me," she said, her tone small and wounded. "Everyone does. Everyone always leaves." "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I'm letting you rest." Her eyes darkened, a thin shadow sliding across her face like a passing cloud. "I don't want to rest." "I know," I said softly, "but you're tired. You've been waiting too long." Her breath hitched, a fragile hitching sound, as if her whole body tightened around a hurt too heavy to carry. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. "You're not alone." "But I will be, after tonight." She stepped closer again. The cold wrapped around me. Her presence pressed like frost into my skin. She reached out a small hand toward mine. "Don't forget me," she whispered again, her voice breaking. I took a shaky breath, then I took a step back. Her expression twisted, confusion, then fear, then something darker, an ache that sank into the earth beneath us. "You're leaving," she said, her voice thin and trembling. "You're just like everyone else." "No," I said gently, shaking my head. "I'm remembering you. I'm remembering everything. And that's why you don't have to stay here anymore." Tears gathered in her eyes, not human tears, but shimmering droplets like dew reflecting candlelight. She hugged the stuffed rabbit to her chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but you don't have to be." She shook her head. "If you forget me, I'll disappear." I knelt down, not close enough for her to touch me, but close enough that our eyes met. "Being forgotten isn't the same as being gone," I said. "And you won't be gone. Not to me, not ever. I'll carry your story. I'll speak your name. I'll make sure the world remembers who you were, not the ghost." Her breath quivered. A small flicker of hope lit her expression. But the little girl who loved birthdays, who loved pink candles, who loved her mom, who deserved to grow up. A wind swept through the mausoleum, not cold but warm, gentle, lifting her hair like invisible hands. The candles fluttered, the air shimmered. Annie stepped back once, twice, Her small chest rose and fell too fast. "But if I go," she whispered, "what will I be?" I swallowed the ache in my throat. "You'll be free." A tremor ran through her, like the moment before a branch snaps under the weight of snow. The rabbit slipped from her fingers. The ground lit in a soft glow, not harsh, not supernatural, but peaceful, like sunlight breaking under the earth. Her blue eyes widened. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. "No," I said. "It won't hurt." Her form flickered, faded, flickered again. She looked at me one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, and then the light took her. Not violently, not painfully, gently, like a mother lifting a child from a bed and carrying her home. The candles extinguished themselves one by one. The glow sank into the earth. The cold dissolved, and the mausoleum fell silent. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty stone room, waiting for a whisper, a shadow, a giggle, anything, but there was nothing. The air was still, peaceful, warm. When I finally walked out, the fog around Section C had lifted entirely. Sunlight crept across the grass, brighter than it had been in weeks. And for the first time since I started working nights at Milbrook Cemetery, I felt alone, but it wasn't a frightening loneliness. It was the absence of someone who had finally found her way home. I glanced back at the mausoleum one last time. There was no frost on its stone, no cold in the air, no candles, no child, just quiet, just rest, and that was enough. If you made it here to the end, take a moment, breathe. What happened in Milbrook Cemetery wasn't just a haunting. It was a cry from a child frozen in the moment of her death, reaching for anyone willing to remember her. Some spirits cling to rage, some cling to sorrow, but some cling to love so fiercely that they never truly move on. Tonight, Annie finally found peace, but the truth is, every cemetery holds a story like hers, a life interrupted, a voice waiting to be heard. And if you ever walk past a cold spot after midnight, or hear a small giggle when the wind is still, just remember, some stories don't end. They just stop being told.